Today I'd like to talk about love. Paul and Timothy's relationship as we take a look at 1st and 2nd Timothy. The Apostle Paul writes right at the beginning, he says, "To Timothy, my true son, in the faith, grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and our Lord Jesus Christ." And then Paul is leaving the young Timothy, who had traveled with him over much of Asia and into Greece and then back, and he's leaving him in Ephesus as the pastor or overseer of the church there, and he's writing back to him and he's trying to encourage him. So as he's encouraging, he says, "Command certain men not to teach false doctrines, to devote themselves to myths and genealogies, and to promote controversies. Rather, God's work, which is by faith." So, Paul is saying right away, Pastor Timothy, you need to watch out for these guys that are promoting controversy within the church, and they're not teaching what I have trained you in to teach in the church. Then, a key phrase for all of our Christian life is the goal of this command is love, which comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. Some have wandered away from the faith, involved in meaningless talk. And so, rather than looking at all of the controversies, looking at all the difficulties, he says, the reason I'm telling you about this is love. And we got to look at Paul and Timothy. They've been through a lot together. Timothy co-authored several of the letters that he wrote to other churches. He had a very close personal relationship with Timothy. And there were problems in that first century church in Ephesus, as there were in many of the other churches that Paul addressed in his letters. But Timothy was his key guy. He was his key guy in Ephesus. And he says, love. That's the bottom line. That's the most important thing. Now, obviously, Jesus, when he was talking to the disciples, and one of the teachers of the law came and he heard about the debate. I'm looking at Mark 12, verse 30, starting in there. And he hears the debate, and then he says, what of all the commandments is the most important? The most important one, Jesus answers, is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And then verse 30 says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." The second of these is, "Love your neighbor as yourself." There's no greater commandment than these. So Paul is saying to Timothy the same thing that Jesus taught the apostles. Love God with everything you got. Love him with all of your heart, your soul, your might, with your mind, with, everything, every single part of your body. Love God. And then the second thing is love your neighbor. And if you do those things, you will fulfill all the commandments. Now, what is Jesus talking about there? Obviously, he's referring back to Deuteronomy and many other places. Deuteronomy 6, verse 5. And there's a whole section here. I'm going to start in verse 4. 6:4 says, "Hear, O Israel, love our God. The Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit down at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. Then tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorposts and on the houses and on your gates." Paul is basically saying to Timothy, and that's what I'm encouraging you today, is to love God with all you've got. So whether it's in the sports arena, on the playing field, whether it's in school, whether it's at home, whether it's at work, whether it's just as you're walking down the street. Love God. And then you guys that are married, or you women that are married, love your spouses. And that's the greatest example you can be for your children. And you coaches, show God's love, because you become like a father to many of your athletes. So just like Paul is saying to Timothy, Timothy, my son, I want you to love God with everything you got. Be an example to those who look up to you, to those who are close to you, because the more we love God, the more we're going to have the power, the strength to love others with a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith.